Hi everyone. So my video is on Skinner chapter 8, which is cause and reasons. So let's get right into it. So he starts off this chapter by giving us a small synopsis, basically telling us that what we were reading is analyzing the behaviors and why people are doing the behaviors. So basically the cause and effect of behaviors. So he starts off by commands, advice, and warnings. So with commands, he talks about it being the first practice of verbal behavior. A good example of a command is a parent telling a child to wash dishes. So if it's the very first command ever, the parent could definitely be like, if you wash dishes, you get the iPad for 30 minutes. And, if you don't wash dishes, you have to read before you go to bed. So the child definitely does not want to read a book, so the child ends up washing the dishes. But now the child also knows that whenever he washes the dishes, he or she, so whenever the child washes the dishes, they know that they are going to get a reinforcer. But if they don't wash a dish, they basically have to read a book. So after commands, he goes from command to warning. And this is still similar to command where the speaker is telling the person what to do. But the difference is the reinforcer or the consequence is not determined by the speaker. It's actually determined by the person that listens to the warning. So a good example of a warning could be, I don't know, my client, let's say I have a client named Tim. Tim and I are on break and he wants to play chase. So we are playing chase and he does not see that he is about to collide with a peer. So to prevent this collision, I say, watch out, really loud, and two things could happen. So number one, he could look in front of him. And once he looks in front of him, he sees that there's a peer, so he immediately stops. Or he does not listen to the warning and he collides with the peer and ends up crying. The next one is advice, like I said, and I feel like advice is pretty self-explanatory where the person or the speaker is giving advice about a behavior, but it's up to the person if the person wants to take the advice. And so if the person takes the advice or does not take the advice, then we know from there if the person will receive that consequence or not from the advice being given. So after this section, he goes into directions and instructions. So direction is the written form of behavior. So let's say my client Tim is all done with his break and his program is to basically read the directions of a color sheet. And so he will look at the color sheet and the color sheet says color the sky blue and color the dog brown and color the grass green. He is looking at the written words or the written directions, and that's the directions. And then from there, from directions, you go into instructions. And so instructions is basically the verbal form of behavior instead of the written form. So a good example of instructions to me would be learning how to drive a car. You definitely have your teacher in the front seat and your teacher is giving you instructions on what to do. Buckle your seatbelt, check your mirrors, check your doors, check X, Y, and Z, push to start or stick the key in the ignition, different things like that. But regardless of what you're doing, the driving teacher is specifically telling you what to do. She's telling you he or she is telling you these steps. So yeah. And after this, he goes into folklore, maxims, and proverbs. And these are the instructions, I feel like, those things that are just passed down from generation to generation. And I feel like a good example of this is actually a real example. When I was younger, my dad used to tell me all the time to cut the TV off when it was a storm. And he told me this is because it stops the power from going out. So when I got older, I definitely asked him where he got that from. And he told me his dad. So I feel like because his dad said it, he felt like it was true. So he passed it down to me. And because he said it, because my dad said it, I felt like it was true. So to this day, even though I do not have a kid, whenever there is a storm, I do turn the TV off, at least for the beginning part of the storm. Just because I definitely don't want the power to go out, and it's definitely something that's passed down from generation to generation. So that's an example of that one. Government and religious laws. I feel like Skinner was talking about our society and how the society definitely plays a factor in how we shape our behaviors. A good example of this, and I'm definitely going to use the example that Skinner used, which was stealing. Stealing is government illegal when it comes to the government. When it comes to religious, thou shalt not steal. And then when it comes to people surrounding us, our family, our friends, our peers, we are definitely looked down upon for stealing. So I feel like since all of these negative factors happen in our society with stealing, that's not something that we should do. Because if we do it, it's definitely a negative consequence and a negative reaction from others if we do it. So the next one is law of science. And I felt like Skinner was talking about following instructions. When we follow instructions to something that we don't want to do, we just do it, and it's because we have to and not because we want to. When it's something that we don't want to do, it definitely comes off as taking our time with it, maybe, or maybe rushing with it, but not fully doing it with a passion. So the next one is contingency shaped versus ruled governed behavior. The first half of this section, he describes how easy it is for us to learn versus learning the contingency. So I feel like a good example of this would be putting together a nightstand. If you are handy with stuff, you automatically know how to put together a nightstand. So since you already automatically know how to do that, you don't look at the rules or look at the directions. But if you are like me and don't know what you're doing, you are going to use the directions and use the rules on how to put together a nightstand. And he also says a person who is following directions, taking advice, or heeding warnings, or even obeying rules or laws does not behave precisely as one who has been directly exposed to the contingencies. Are the rules and the contingencies is the next section. And to me, after reading this section, I felt like he was saying that rules are not in the contingencies. And I feel like he was also saying, once you already know how to do something, you don't think about the rules, or you don't even look at the rules. So with ABA therapy, I already know what to do, how to run programs, how to pair, different things like that. But if a new therapist is coming in to observe me, they're automatically looking at what I do because they're thinking about the rules and the factors and everything on ABA therapy. The next section is reason and reasonings. With reasoning, he starts off with induction, and induction is reasoning from part to whole, from particulars to generals. I feel like he was saying the behavior we reinforce is the one that will continue. The quote that I got from this was, reasoning about behavior is a matter of analyzing the reasons for behavior, and reasoning about a problem is a matter of looking at the problematical contingencies rather than merely altering them through established problem-solving procedures. I believe that he is discussing that at times there are no clear reasons for why we do the things we do. And I also feel like he Sometimes there's no way to look at the reasons as to why we do the things we do or the problems that come with the behaviors. The next part is folly and reason. So I'm gonna start off with a quote with this one, and he says, "There would be nothing to be reasonable about if it were not for the effect of food, sex, and other basic reinforcers." And I feel like he was saying basically reinforcers increase our behavior. So if my client Tim knows that he wants food and he knows that if he cries he gets food, he's going to cry every time he wants food instead of demanding for food verbally. So every time he cries, we give him food. The next one is intuition and reasoning. After reading this section, I feel like Skinner is saying that intuition does not go with reasoning. And I feel like he is saying this because if we take our gut feeling or our emotions out of reasoning about a behavior, we are able to see the behaviors clearly and we are able to understand the behaviors a little bit more. Faith and reason is the next section. And the faith in your essence, in your spirituality, is the strength of our behaviors. So mainly if we do something, it comes from, our faith and our belief. Impulse and deliberation. I'm going to start off with a quote. He says, "Deliberate behavior proceeds through an analysis of reasons. Impulsive behavior is a direct effect of contingencies." If we continue to debate on an action, I feel like we will always debate on it. So basically, if we continue to debate on an action, we will always debate on whether or not to do it, versus if we just do it impulsively, and don't think about it, we don't really think about the consequences. Yep. The next one is invented reasons. And he said, "No rules can be derived from contingencies." So when a person acts on a behavior, there might not be any thoughts to the rules or the laws that he is breaking, or he or she is breaking, or that they are doing. And since that person does have a behavior without an explanation, it could be seen as superstitious. And because this is a superstitious behavior, it reinforces the person, it reinforces them positively, and the person continues to do it. So even though it looks superstitious to us, it may not be superstitious to them, but they can't explain why they're doing it. The last is deduction. So basically, if a behavior is not understood, we are able to go back to the rules of the behavior and make new rules. And once we make new rules on top of the old rules, we are able to see the behavior more clearly. So I look at it as like a cycle. And then truth, continuing to update rules and laws. So this also leads to deduction. And when we look to better look at the truth about a behavior, we look at the laws. And if we need to create new laws, we continue to create the new laws on top of the old laws, and that helps us bring out the truth in behaviors. So with that being said, my two questions are you able to teach a contingency-shaped behavior without any reasoning? And then my next question is, could we use intuition with reasoning? Thank you. See you guys later.